Welcome back, wonderful creators of your own disaster. I've been waiting for you to come because I need to say something aloud. Something they thought you'd never discover while you were busy trying to recover, move on, and be a better person. They were in the shadows, planning something premeditated and purposefully unpleasant. And if I told you everything at once, your hands would undoubtedly start trembling. I am not referring about the treachery or falsehoods you have already discovered. I'm referring to the layers underlying it. The meetings you were purposefully excluded from, the chats when your name felt like poison on their lips, and the strategies they devised while smiling straight at you. You assumed you understood the whole story, but you did not. You assumed you had seen the worst of them, but you had not. And today we are ripping aside every single curtain. Here is the painful reality. They were laughing while you struggled, doubted yourself, and wondered what went wrong. Not in public or where others may see it, but in private. Group conversations, late-night phone calls, and informal gatherings in which your misery became their amusement. They examined your pain like a binge-worthy Netflix series. They dissected your breakdown like amateur psychiatrists eating popcorn. They even took screenshots of your sensitive moments and traded them like treasures. The worst part is the detail that makes your stomach churn. They did not engage in any of this out of animosity. They did it because seeing your pain made them feel strong. Your suffering served as confirmation that they had triumphed. Your bewilderment was their victory lap. Your silence constituted a standing ovation. But things become darker. They didn't just speak about you. They intentionally sought to keep you isolated, insecure, and locked in the mental prison they created for you. They send a notification once you started healing. A reminder. A cleverly prepared statement designed to pull the scab open after you got your feet. They circulated another rumor, sowed another seed of doubt, or triggered another catastrophe. They were so subtle and cunning that you blamed yourself for each defeat. You felt your recuperation was taking too long. You believed you were too sensitive, broken, and wounded. However, the fact is that they were obstructing your rehabilitation because you were mending. Threatened their storyline. If you improved, flourished, or proved them wrong, their whole tale about you would come apart. Now, let's speak about the psychological methods they deployed in their silent battle, which you were unaware of. They used covert animosity to injure you while portraying themselves as innocent or even helpful. They check in on you in a tone that suggests you're coming apart. They would provide counsel that was really criticism masked as concern. They'd bring up your prior errors with the intention of helping you learn from them. Each encounter becomes a trap. Every discussion was a minefield. Every communication had a subtext designed to make you doubt your own perspective of reality. And when you eventually responded, defended yourself, or established a boundary, they immediately switched the script. Suddenly you were unstable, belligerent, and unreasonable. They altered history so quickly, it made your head spin. The individual who had been torturing you for months now plays the victim who was just trying to be a friend all along. They were looking for your weak areas and flaws. They may take advantage of the crack. They may pry open till you were entirely broken. But here's something they never expected. What their small psychology experiments failed to foresee. You did not break in the manner they anticipated. You did not collapse into a cautionary story that might be mocked behind closed doors. You did not provide the example they needed to maintain their sense of superiority. Instead, you did something utterly unexpected. You became quiet. You withdrew. You pushed yourself within and began rebuilding from a place they couldn't access, watch, or manage. And the quiet, the abrupt loss of access to your inner world horrified them. Because when someone they're accustomed to manipulating stops reacting, it seems like they've lost their hold on reality. Let me tell you what occurred inside the rooms. You weren't in those talks when your name was spoken as a curse. They persuaded themselves that they were the protagonists of the tale, that everything they did was legitimate, and that you deserved it. They created a whole mythology around you, portraying you as the issue. The chaos, the root of all problems, and the most twisted aspect. They began to believe the tale they produced. They really believed themselves that you were the poisonous one, the manipulator, and the source of all dysfunction, despite the fact that every action they performed was intended to damage you, isolate you, and distort your reputation. It makes little difference whether they were unable to see what they were doing or just did not care. Admitting the truth would entail addressing the monster that stared back at them. Most individuals lack the fortitude to be so honest. This is something they never told you. Something they deliberately buried. There were those who wanted to reach out, who saw the brutality and felt awful for participating or standing by. However, if someone expressed any doubt, the group closed around them, reinforcing the narrative and policing the tale to ensure that no one deviated from the script. It developed into a cult-like attitude in which challenging the group meant risking being the next victim. So they remained quiet, even though their conscience was screaming. They watched you suffer because defending themselves seemed safer than safeguarding the truth. And now, as time passes, some of them lay awake at night wondering what they facilitated and what they might have prevented if they had the courage to act. However, true bravery is uncommon in real life. After the fact, guilt is free. Now, let's speak about gaslighting, since that's where they really refine the technique, transforming manipulation into performance art. Gaslighting is not just lying. It gradually causes you to doubt your own recollections, experiences, and perspective of reality. They do a horrible act and then deny that it ever occurred. They would say something hurtful, then pretend you misheard or misunderstood. They'd harm you on purpose, then look perplexed when you felt pain from twisting it. So your response seemed unreasonable, overly sensitive, or wholly imagined. Over time, that continuous rejection of your lived experience began to inflict much more damage than they ever confessed. It has gradually corroded your relationship to the truth itself. You started to doubt your instincts, those quiet internal alarms that had always alerted you when anything was awry. You paused before believing your own ideas, wondering whether your recollection was flawed. Perhaps you misunderstood everything. Perhaps your feelings were exaggerated rather than signals. You replayed talks in your thoughts, examining every word and emotion to determine if you imagined the brutality or were somehow responsible for its creation. And that's when the real harm started. You found yourself apologizing for things you hadn't done, minimizing your own emotions, convincing oneself that your misery was unjustified or inconvenient. You eventually slashed yourself, wondering if you were losing your mind completely. I wonder whether you were the unstable one. The dramatic one, the spark that started all conflicts. And that was precisely their objective. This was not an accident nor a misunderstanding. This was psychological warfare. They wanted you to be bewildered, emotionally off balance, and question every internal signal that used to safeguard you. The more uncertain you got, the simpler it was to maintain control. The more you questioned your own judgment, the more you relied on their version of events. They used your misunderstanding as leverage. Your self-doubt was their weapon. They wanted you stuck in a labyrinth with barriers that shifted every time you thought you discovered a way out. But here is where their approach failed. Gaslighting works only if the person being deceived continues to participate. It demands closeness. It demands a talk. It demands an emotional involvement. It necessitates you continually attempting to explain oneself, clarify the circumstance, or demonstrate your innocence. The instant you pushed back, you stopped reacting to every charge, defending yourself against falsehoods, and seeking closure or explanation. Their whole building has disintegrated. When you left their psychological range, the charm dissolved. They found themselves yelling into the emptiness, performing for an empty room, manipulating a presence that no longer existed. They had built their power on your responses, and now you aren't giving them any. Your cool, purposeful, unwavering stillness became the one thing they were never equipped to deal with. Manipulators thrive on emotional responses. Your outrage reassures them that they still matter. Your anguish reinforces their supremacy. Your bewilderment demonstrates that they can still distort the story. Even your efforts to find calm or settlement remain significant. But you got genuinely silent. Not the type of quiet that begs for attention, but the kind that indicates total disengagement. They panicked. You withdrew the gasoline. You disconnected their power supply. You left them bewildered, angry, and desperate. Because the game cannot continue if one player leaves the board. That's when everything became black. Smear campaign. This wasn't just gossip or petty drama. This was a concerted, deliberate campaign to undermine your whole social base. They weren't satisfied with harming you directly. They intended to alter how other people saw you. They wanted every area you entered to seem hostile before you said anything. They twisted your most sensitive moments into tales that portrayed you as unstable. They used your emotional responses to their assault as proof that you were the aggressor. They took your sorrow out of context, stripped it of reasoning, and presented it as evidence that you were the issue all along. People who heard these tales did not ask any questions. They did not request any further information. They did not examine the facts. They did not speak to you. They just absorbed the tale like sponges and instantly changed how they interacted with you. More guarded, less friendly, and more critical, as if they were suddenly seeing you through a warped glass that someone else had given them. You observed the hesitations, peculiar stares, discussions becoming shorter, and relationships becoming colder without explanation. That was not paranoia. That was the slander campaign that spread like smoke into every aspect of your existence. However, the consequences extended beyond reputational harm. The slander effort had a strategic goal: isolation. They tried to cut you off from support so that you had no supporters left, and everybody who might have protected you was already poisoned against you. They wanted your name to enter the room before you did. Already discolored, frail, and doubtful. They wanted you locked in a sort of social quicksand, where any effort to cleanse your reputation just sank you deeper. Because this is the horrible, raw reality of smear campaigns. They are effective because people choose villains over complexity. People prefer easy stories over the effort required to think critically. People will prefer believe a spectacular deception than face the sad reality. They counted on it. They anticipated your tiredness. They relied on people's lethargy. They relied on the reality that most people prefer the whisper of rumor than the weight of honesty. And for a time they got precisely what they desired. However, they were not prepared for what happened when the dust had settled. When people begin to see the cracks in the tale, when patterns emerge, when contradictions build up, when truth ceases to fight and simply outlasts the lie, that is when the next chapter begins, whether they realize it or not. They meticulously design the trap they set around you. It was constructed such that no matter how noble, calm, or reasonable you were, defending yourself made you appear guilty. They claimed you were unduly defensive, which they would twist into further evidence that you had something to conceal. If you remained quiet, they argued it was an admission of guilt, calling it suspicious or manipulative. If you were emotional because you are human and betrayal hurts, they called you unstable, dramatic, impossible to reason with. And if you remained cool, thinking rationally would rescue you. They described you as cold and calculating. There was no proper action, answer, or method to rescue you from the story they had already crafted. Every escape was blocked. Every route resulted in another allegation. And they were well aware of it. They set the trap knowing you couldn't win, since the goal was never truth, justice, or fairness. It was supremacy. It was about weakening your capacity to stand on your own. It was about ensuring that you never really healed. Never rebuild your sense of self. Never escape the shadow cast by the fake persona they created for you. However, manipulators usually neglect one important reality. Lies have a shelf life. Smear campaigns have an expiry date. Truth does not be hidden forever. Not because individuals are decent, but because patterns cannot be hidden continuously. Eventually, others discover the irregularities. They see that the same drama repeatedly revolves around the same individual. They begin to notice that this person, who has presented themselves as a permanent victim, is always at the heart of mayhem. They begin to see that everyone who comes near to them eventually becomes an adversary. They begin to wonder why this individual has so many disagreements with others. Why every narrative they tell needs a fresh villain. Why they always seem to be the wounded hero in their own narrative. Over time, people stop absorbing their stories at face value and start noticing the cracks. Tiny fractures in the mask they've worn for so long. And when the mask finally slips, when the truth finally claws its way out of the shadows, everyone who joined in the effort to destroy you is forced to confront their own complicity. Some will come forward years later with shaky apologies. Most will never say a word, but every single one of them will know what they did. And that quiet, private knowledge will follow them forever. Now, let me take you even deeper into the darkness, because there are things they did behind your back that would make you physically sick if you knew every detail. When you were struggling. When you lost that job. When your relationship fell apart. When you hit the lowest point of your life. These people celebrated. They didn't celebrate in obvious ways, manipulated rarely do. But in their private group chats, their secret conversations, their late-night calls. They cheered your suffering. They toasted your pain. They called it karma, justice, or you finally facing reality. They convinced themselves you deserved every blow life dealt you. And the rush they felt from watching you fall apart became intoxicating. It bonded them. Your suffering became their entertainment, their inside joke, their twisted form of social glue. Because toxic people don't bond over loyalty or compassion. They bond over mutual resentment. They bond over tearing someone down. They bond over shared cruelty. And you were the perfect target. The lightning rod that electrified their shallow friendships and gave their empty lives meaning. But they didn't just sit back and enjoy your pain. They actively engineered more of it. They went to people in your life, people you trusted, people you loved, and quietly poisoned those relationships long before you realized anything was wrong. They dropped subtle, slow-burning comments designed to plant seeds of doubt. They'd say things like, "I'm worried about them. Something seems off." Or "Have you noticed they've been acting strange?" Or the dagger disguised as concern. "I hate to say it, but I think they're dealing with some serious issues." And because these comments were delivered with such practice, sincerity, soft tone, concerned expression, hesitant phrasing, they slipped under the radar. They bypassed suspicion and rooted themselves in the minds of the people around you. By the time you interacted with those people again, they were already looking at you differently, more cautiously, more critically, more distantly. You felt something shift, but you couldn't explain it. You just sensed that the room had changed. The conversations felt heavier, the trust had thinned, and you had no idea why. Here's the layer of betrayal that cuts the deepest. Some of the people closest to you, people you confided in, people you believed were on your side, were secretly feeding information back to your enemies. They weren't just listening to your pain. They were transmitting it. They reported your fears, your private struggles, your mistakes, your vulnerabilities. They relayed your frustrations, your plans, your opinions. They were double agents. Smile in your face while acting as informants behind your back. Some did it to feel included. Some did it because they feared being targeted. Next, some got manipulated into thinking they were helping, and some did it simply because betrayal was easier than confronting the truth. Whatever the reason, the result was the same. Your words, your emotions, your private moments were being handed over to the people who wanted to dismantle you. And the cruelest part, you had no idea. You thought you had support. You thought certain people were safe. You didn't realize that every time you opened your heart, someone in the room was taking notes and sending updates to those who wanted to see you fall apart. This wasn't just betrayal. It was infiltration. It was sabotage. It was psychological warfare carried out by people wearing the mask of friendship. And they thought you'd never find out. But you did. And now everything has changed. Every time you confided in them, every moment, you thought you'd finally found someone trustworthy enough to hold your pain, they were simultaneously earning you like an investigator building a case while you were pouring out your emotions believing you were safe. They were quietly screenshotting your messages, saving your voice notes and memorizing your reactions. They weren't engaging in conversation to support you. They were gathering material. Your heartbreak became their talking points. Your vulnerability became evidence. Your trust was the mask they hid behind the camouflage that allowed them to move unnoticed through the most delicate corners of your life. They played their roles flawlessly. They matched your tone, mirrored your emotions, pretended to care just enough to keep you comfortable, just enough to keep you opening up. And every time you shared something raw or personal, they tucked it away to weaponize later. Your deepest insecurities became their inside jokes. Your private moments became their ammunition. They sat there studying your fears as if your emotional wounds were maps leading straight to your destruction. So when you eventually figure out who these people were, when you finally see the truth without the comforting filters of hope or loyalty, the betrayal hits different. It is an ordinary betrayal. It's a betrayal that rewires your understanding of trust itself. Being attacked by people who dislike you is painful. Sure, but expected being targeted by strangers or rivals has a logic to it. But being sabotaged by people you loved, people you defended, people you bent over backward to support, that ruptures something deeper. It makes you question your own judgment, your own perception, your own ability to recognize danger. It forces you to rebuild not just your boundaries, but your understanding of human nature. Now, let's walk through the timeline because once you see it clearly, your entire history with these people will look different. You probably thought the betrayal began after some recent conflict. The argument, the falling out, the sudden shift. But the truth is far more disturbing. The groundwork for this betrayal was laid much earlier, long before anyone raised their voice. Long before anyone walked away. Long before you sensed something was off. They had been studying you from the beginning while you thought you were creating a real connection. They were analyzing you like a chess player, analyzing an opponent's strategy. While you were bonding, they were scanning while you were trying to build a future with them, whether as friends, co-workers, partners. They were dissecting your past. They noticed what made you hesitate. What made you insecure. What made you soften. They identified your emotional pressure points one by one, like someone checking for weak spots in a wall they intend to break down later. The betrayal didn't begin when it became visible. It began in the quiet moments when you let your guard down, because those were the moments they began collecting ammunition when you laughed with them. When you confided in them. When you felt safe. For the first time in a long time, those small, warm moments you thought were building closeness were exactly when they were building their case against you. They weren't reacting to a future conflict. They were preparing for it. And the reason they didn't strike immediately is brutally simple. They needed you fully invested first. They needed you to trust them so deeply that you could not imagine them lying to you. They needed you comfortable enough that you would overlook small red flags. They needed you emotionally attached, emotionally dependent, emotionally open. Because betrayal hits harder when the victim believes the relationship is real. They wanted maximum damage. They wanted the fall to be devastating, not disappointing. And that kind of destruction requires patience. This wasn't impulsive cruelty. This wasn't a sudden outburst of anger. This was premeditated psychological warfare wrapped in the disguise of friendship. They studied your patterns with scientific precision. They mapped your emotional landscape like an explorer charting territory. They collected your triggers, fears, weaknesses, dreams and desires. They knew exactly which string to pull and when. And when the moment came, the moment you began to rise, evolve or grow beyond the role they wanted you to play. Because here's the truth. People don't like admitting some individuals cannot handle being outgrown. They can tolerate you as long as you stay beneath them. But the second you start improving your life, the second your light shines too brightly, the second your growth exposes their stagnation, they panic. Your confidence becomes a threat. Your potential becomes a mirror reflecting everything they aren't. And insecure people lash out when they feel diminished. Your evolution didn't inspire them. And rather than rise with you, they decided to pull you down. Now let's talk about the fake apologies because some of them came crawling back with what looked like remorse on the surface, but was nothing more than manipulation. It was about protecting themselves, protecting how others viewed them, protecting their ego, protecting their version of events. A PR stunt, a disguised attempt to regain access to the power they once held over you. You took it the wrong way.